What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by the one and only Robert Cessna. Cease, let's just take a moment in memoriam for the A&M athletics season, which is not over, actually, but for the most part is. How would you, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think about this A&M athletic year in general?
Underachieving. I just don't think you could say, well, the tennis team did well, but when you look at the big sports, football, both basketball teams, baseball, softball, it's kind of ironic because I was doing a column about the baseball and softball programs together last week, and it's amazing how sometimes I feel we definitely reflect the fans, the community, because obviously this is who we cover. And so I was writing, and then I said that this was the worst diamond season in school history. That was kind of my lead, and and I worked on it, like I usually do, for a few hours, thought about it for a couple of days. And then when it come out on the stone, so to speak, when we're looking at the last check, I go, wait a minute. How could you say the worst when A&M softball team was the number one season? So I took a step back and I said it's the most frustrating season. And I think that suits it best when you think of the football team. Hey, Cessna, they started 7-1, but they finished 8-5. Men's basketball team was in the top 10. Women's basketball team was supposed to build on last year. And I mean, they never got out of the gates. They were like, if you're at the Kentucky Derby, you go, like, where's the women's basketball team? They never got out of the gate.
Yeah, they lost to, what was it, A&M Corpus?
Oh, then you look at the softball team. They're number one in the nation, but, man, it's so painful to go from number one to nothing in really a blink of an eye. So, yeah, I don't know about you, but, man, just underachieving.
Yeah, I think that underachieving, frustrating, it says it all. And it's not that A&M had, well, the women's basketball team had a losing season, but all these other programs, it wasn't as if they had these horrific losing seasons that was just a beatdown. But it was the way that they lost in such painful ways when there was glimmers of hope all the way around, right? When you think of what football was able to play for, what men's basketball everybody thought they were capable of, baseball, it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to be back in Omaha. We were joking back in January of like, all right, Alex, you better save the Omaha fund. It was a foregone conclusion, and then to miss the postseason altogether is just a total shock.
Well, and as I get older, I don't want to date myself, whatever. I can sympathize with older people that are really diehards when they're going to have another chance like that. Like you said, okay, football, they overachieve for like half a season. But you're sitting there and go, man, they go to the college football playoff. And when's the last time they went to the college football playoff?
If you get there, who knows? Just see what happens.
But they've never been there. Then you take a men's basketball and go, man, I can remember being at the Alamo Dome, watching AC Law hit that shot that he should, and you go like, wow, has it been that long? And then you think about the softball team, 2017, they go and run, they go up, they go bang, bang. It's almost like you're not there. When you go to the College World Series or anything, you go bang, bang. I've been up there a couple of times, and it's almost like you're not there. But then you got to go back to 2008 that the softball team went up there and did damage. You go, wait a minute, that's 17 years ago. And then you go like, and I'm watching the college softball this weekend because, know most of those teams, a lot of the players, and you're thinking, man, A&M could have been there so easily, and that's when I think it hurts. Like you said, when you can almost reach out there and touch something. When are you going to get back there again? It's easy to say, oh, you're going to be, like you said, like baseball team, oh, you're going to go back there next year. I don't think so. They didn't even get the region. So, that's why I use the word frustration, because, man, so close. Can you imagine? Okay, for example, take all the disappointments we have. What if the men's basketball team would have gone on the roll, went to the Final Four, lost their first round? We'd still be talking about that men's basketball team. I mean, all you have to do is have one breakthrough. If the A&M baseball team was still playing in super regionals, we would talk about how bad the season is. But thank God the baseball team saved the day. Nobody saved the day.
Nobody saved the day. Well, the big news from last week was that there is not going to be a coaching change at the A&M baseball program. Michael Early is going to return for a second season. Cease, do you agree with the decision? What do you make of the decision from Trev to keep Mike?
Well, once again, I always like when I make a statement of something that I'm not that close to every day. I like to think I'm a little bit more objective. I think sometimes, for example, a lot of people ask me about women's basketball. I cover women's basketball on a steady basis. So it's always hard. You're like, give them a break, this and that, da-da-da. But, I covered maybe 5-6 baseball games this year.
Sorry, I had to take a few Sundays off.
Yeah, well, and you also had the men's basketball team.
That's true.
So, when I look at it is, I even go back to the high schools and I always say this. Okay, firing a person only gets rid of half a problem. And, who do you hire or what do you hire? It's like throwing a pass. If you make a 60-yard touchdown, it's great. You also can have an incompletion. You also can have an interception. That's two bad things can go wrong.
Yeah, there's two bad outcomes in a passing play.
And there's something to deal about this. So when I looked on the injuries, everything, and man, I don't care if you're in high school, whatever, I keep going back to is I don't care how prepared you are. When you become a coach for the first time, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to screw up and whatever, but A&M had the talent to overcome screw-ups. No, they didn't. The talent didn't. So my point, making a long story short, I'd roll the dice for another year, particularly about money. I think people got to remember they're still paying Jimbo, and there's something to be said for that. Money's not rolling in because guess what? We just talked about all the A&M teams that are the major sports struggling. So who's going to say, hey, here's some more. Let me give you $10,000. Let me give you $100,000 to lose some more. So once again and I don't think Early had a fair chance. I don't think anybody you come in and they said, I don't care if he even lost more games. If you decided he was the guy, which Alberts did, I think, in today's time, I get it. Forget the 4 and 5 years, but you got to give the guy at least 2 years. I mean, oh my gosh, it's A&M's always been notorious for me for not firing coaches quick enough. And then everybody said they're going to fire Early. I'm thinking like, wow. I mean, this was the guy a year ago, and now you're going to say, well, hey, man, this guy sucks. We got to go. And then I'm thinking about baseball. I go, unless they're hiring Schlossnagel back, I mean, and
I don't know. There might be some Texas fans that wouldn't mind him walking after this last weekend.
We can talk about that, but Van Horn ain't leaving Arkansas. Johnson ain't leaving LSU.
I don't know if you want to hire a guy like O'Sullivan after his thing after this weekend.
And then what's funny is
Vitello ain't leaving.
On the outside looking in, a lot of people I kept hearing the names were Alabama coach, the Kansas coach, the Oregon coach. They all go bang bang in the regional tournament. So that once again I think it's a bad situation. Will it get better? I can't get much worse, but I will say this: next year at this time, if A&M doesn't make the tournament, then you probably need a change because 2 years and today. What you walked into, here's the deal: is if suddenly they gave me a Rolls Royce and I'm bumping all the fenders and banging it up and go, hey, Cessna, you got a $100,000 car. What are you doing? If I don't start learning to drive better and get it in the driveway, I'm taking that car away from you. So if Early doesn't make the tournament next year, I don't think. Come on, 13 out of 16 teams made the NCAA tournament. If he's got to at least make the tournament next year.
Well, that's a fair assessment. The thing now is A&M they basically get a head start on the transfer portal, which should be a good thing for the Aggies.
Vanderbilt and Texas also got a head start.
Well, that's a good point. And 9 of the 13 SEC teams that made the NCAA tournament are out. But point being that A&M's got a decent roster rebuild to be had because they're losing some key guys like Wyatt Hensler, Gavin Cash, Hayden Schott, they're all out of eligibility. Guys like Ryan Prager, Jay Laviolette, they're going to go pro. So are probably guys like Justin Lampkin and Caden Kent. I mean, that's half your everyday starters and your starting rotation gone pro. And so A&M's got a lot of work to be done. It's going to be curious to see who of the guys that are draft eligible are drafted and sign. Because that's the weird thing about baseball, right? Is that you can get drafted and opt to not sign, a la Ryan Prager last summer, which stunned just about everybody. But how many guys are going to be in that situation, and can A&M hang on to any of them is going to be a key question. And unfortunately for A&M, those questions aren't going to be answered until about late July, which is kind of it's not great timing if you're A&M in that regard, but plenty of work to be done. They know they need starting pitching because they're going to lose two guys for sure. Patton's a guy that's probably on the fence to get drafted and signed. They're going to need a shortstop probably because Caden Kent's probably gone. They're probably going to need an outfielder now that Jay Laviolette's gone. And they're going to need some hitting because that was a weak spot in this team this year, was that they just did not slug. They need guys that can hit the ball and not swing for the fences every single time, right? They need guys that can get a double or two here and there, right?
Well, and I once again, on the outside, a little bit looking in and reading a lot. You got to remember, you touch on something I think you need to be aware of. SEC is still the best conference in the country by far. 9 teams that are good are also looking to transfer and improve where they screwed up this year. And I know a lot of Aggies, as rightfully so, took delight in Schlossnagle and Texas losing, but you got to remember they weren't picked to win the conference. They weren't not supposed to do well. So
they were probably projected to do exactly what they did: get to a regional final and lose.
And not at their place. So when you look at, I was reading some of Schlossnagle's quotes and everybody else. It's like they basically. Maybe you equated a little bit to A&M football season, and they won the SEC going away, the best league, in which I was amazed at because I didn't think the roster was that good.
Yeah, they won by 2 games. Very impressive.
And they cratered at the end. But once again, you're battling 9 other schools right now that are hitting the transfer portal real hard, and then you've got the league's 4 best teams, quote, Arkansas, LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. They're still playing. And so once again Mr. Early does have to get with it because you touched it. They've got a lot of holes to finish, and I don't know those other rosters very well, but I think they probably have less holes to fill that you're competing against, and you finished 14th or whatever in the league. So it's a tough situation, and you think of A&M baseball. They love baseball around here. You got to win. And you only win with talent, and you can't rely totally on transfers. Transfers got to fill holes. Like Hensler, if he'd come into a perfect team, he would have filled a huge hole because you'd have still had Grahovic. He'd have probably been at second base. You'd had a good hitter all year long. The transfer Cash from Tech didn't pan out, which is going to happen. So you look at how many holes that A&M has to fill right now. I hope they also have a good freshman class coming in because they're going to need it.
Well, that's the thing, too, is that they do have a good freshman class coming in, but a lot of the top-end talent is
if they stay
draft risk.
Right, exactly. Right? I talked to the guy, the new Bombers coach, and he said he'd be shocked if Wilson does, the fine hitter from Hallettsville, he'd be shocked if he plays at A&M. And once again baseball is such a strange sport, is what Alex touched on, all these variables you have to deal in, but the fans don't care about that. There's 7,000 fans already feel cheated. They want to see a much better team on that field. They want to see you beating somebody like Cal and going to the World Series in Oregon and whatever. So they're ready for the fact that there was no playoff baseball at Olsen Field is just inexcusable.
Well, there have been some good things that have happened in the last week for A&M sports.
Yeah,
Haley Cooper, she finished in the top 10 at the U.S. Women's Open, which also included 2 active A&M golfers who did not make the cut, but still pretty neat opportunity for Vanessa Villarrolos and Lauren Wynn to get out there and play on that stage. But hey, Haley Cooper, she's really tearing it up out there right now and really got a huge break this weekend with some life-changing money.
Well, what I have to like about her, I remember I never covered her by saying that by interviewing her, but obviously she came in. Caldwell got her to transfer. She was really the foundation, one of the stones of his program, and for her to come in and not only do well here, then you go out and see she had made $100,000 on that minor tour, and she got $330 Sunday. But just forget about the money. She finished tied for seventh in the U.S. Open. That's just going to help A&M and help Caldwell. Once again, you got to have. He's got a program. He just doesn't have a player. He also signed the number 2 class in the country, and they dipped down this year. You're going to do that because I want to say the 24 All-Americans in women's golf, half of them are underclassmen. So, it's like the young stars. It's a sport where the young talent, you got to have young talent, and he didn't really have it because the last talent that took him to back-to-back match play experiences at the NCAA championship, they left. And so now he's bringing in the next group. He had a little bit of hiccup. Remember, he hadn't been here that long. His program's not where like Stanford is or someone like that. But I think this class coming in will get him over the hump. So, and I get it. We're talking about minor sports, but they still matter. And so that was, even though they didn't get to the NCAA championships this year, what Cooper did, I know Coach Caldwell had to be very excited.
Yeah, definitely a bright future. You mentioned that recruiting class, and yes, I would be shocked if they didn't put together a run next spring out on the links. And then, of course, A&M men's and women's track hosted the NCAA West regional meet. Pretty good showing for both the men and the women, and the men especially, they've got a legit shot to win the NCAA championship out in Oregon next week. And the women got a pretty good shot too, with quite a few entries on both sides.
Yeah, I think they end up with 12 on each side. And I was trying to do some studying last night, and unfortunately, the top 4 teams in the way it is in the country are pretty salty. I want to say the A&M women went into the week second. Georgia was number 1. I want to say Georgia got 14, and they got both qualifiers. USC, men and women. And first thing you look at, which Pat Henry will teach track dummies 101 like me, you got to get both relays there.
Oh, yeah.
And so A&M did that, but so did their competitors. And so when you look at it, but A&M, that ace in the hole, so to speak, is the A&M women. They have 2 athletes that should win the NCAA championships. So you're looking at 20 points. And when you can start out with 20 points to start out with, that automatically almost puts you in the top 20. But, once again, he's his program. And, what's funny is Pat Henry, no one's won more championships, I think, than him when you look at it. But they haven't won one in, I want to say...
I feel like 2017 was the last
16 or 17. And so the fact that he's going up there with both teams having a chance, and once again, you're going to have to, believe it or not, you're going to have to get somebody that maybe you had slotted at 8th, suddenly comes in at 3rd or whatever. And then
you need someone to have a big day.
And you're looking at 5 or 6 point swing, but then you got to worry the other team doesn't do that as well. I thought it was pretty funny, and everybody knows I'm not a track aficionado, as like, Pat would say, whatever. But I thought it was funny that, you come in here, you go out there and meet in Oregon's here and Southern Cal, and they're really national contenders. They're here competing. Then 2 weeks from now, they're going to be competing in Oregon. So it was nice to see the top talent here. When you thought there was only 2 regionals in the whole country, if you went by, there was people running everywhere out there for 4 days. And so the fact that it's been not the year A&M's wanted in their sports, but they could end with a bang. I can remember that year when men and women both won. Like the campus was shut down, but you came back, and they had a lot of people came out and greeted them. And winning 2 championships in the same sport, once again, is you kind of take that for granted. Oh, Pat Henry does this all the time, and it might have been 14 or whatever year it was, 13. You know what I'm saying? Suddenly, a decade later, they haven't come close to winning a double championships. So sometimes you got to appreciate where you're at.
You got to strike when the iron's hot because you don't know when it's going to come around again.
And they've got some athletes that are worth the price of admission to watch.
Oh
compete.
yeah,
so
I mean, watching Jaqueline Scott alone, he is fantastic. Sam Whitmarsh made the 800 meters look like it was the easiest thing ever, and then Anna on the women's side, Sophia Yakashina.
Oh, you can pronounce that name. That's good.
I try. She's the heptathlete that is in contention to win the NCAA championship, and it's impressive. Like that to me is probably one of the most impressive events because you got to be good at 7 things.
Yeah, and then they also have Winnie the Pooh, but I know her last name is
Winnie B.
Winnie B, but Winnie the Pooh for me. But I mean, it's like she's probably will win the. I think it's a triple jump. It's a triple jump. Yeah. So she's pretty amazing, and like Pat said, she probably can get another foot. She's leaping so far behind, she doesn't want to scratch. I mean, when she gets the NCAA, who knows what she might do?
Yeah, she might get one for good measure, just to get one on the board and then see how far he can go. But yeah, we'll be having some track coverage next week as the Aggies get ready to go out to Oregon. Cease, we'll close with this. Couple of local boys we mentioned. Ty and Nathan Hodge, supposed to be talking to them later this afternoon on the phone. They helped UTSA beat Texas at the Austin Regional. And, what a great story for UTSA, a program that has not really had much baseball success in its history. And now they're 2 wins away from Omaha, and they've got a legitimate shot to go out and beat UCLA in Los Angeles this weekend. Yeah,
and when you stop and think, this is when it's nice when you call your community. When you think about it, wasn't that long ago you could go out and watch or cover the Hodge boys playing at Consolidated. And then for the Bombers last year, they played a little bit. And then if you're real old at tooth, you can remember when Billy Hodge was playing for the Aggies, and then he went into the major leagues and was catching the lefty Randy Jones when he had some cups of coffee going up to the major leagues, and Billy's still around. So you talk about when you see those things that they're representing not only A&M, but they're representing our community. And, it's a little bit, and I guess we also, to mention that, and then mention in the NBA Finals, there's 2 Aggies. We need to mention that.
Yeah, we got Alex Caruso and Quentin Jackson on either side. So an Aggie is going to get a ring this year. Yeah, I don't know. Who are you an NBA guy?
Not at all.
Not at all.
My son, you talk about opposites, like my son loves the NBA. And, of course, he doesn't text his dad because he knows his dad doesn't give a flip.
Come on, Randy.
About it. But Randy's into the NBA. And that way, well, he should. So he got a jersey and everything like that. So, and he's into players. He's not into teams. He's one of those guys that I guess maybe that's the new wave. You pick players as opposed to picking teams.
Not that I'm probably going to get big and famous one of these days, but
you get big.
Yeah, I could get big. Probably not famous.
Barbecue, yeah.
But nonetheless, I will probably always be the second most famous Alex from my own neighborhood, considering the basketball court in Castlegate is named after Alex Caruso.
Yeah, and you think that's about a great deal. And I can remember when they say he was a ball boy, and I remember when he played.
Did you know he was a ball boy at A&M?
Yeah. Did you remember that A&M softball used to have a player, Hodak, who played for the men? It's like, you remember those little facts, but at least Alex has made those facts. And you think about his dad, working at A&M. But what's interesting is it's always nice to be wrong. And you saw this kid that was a great high school player, and he was great in college and played hard. And I kept saying, I don't know. NBA is a different animal. I don't know. And you think about somebody like AC Law, didn't have a long pro career, and then Alex Caruso did. So you think kudos to him. And that's why don't let people tell you what your life can be if you're like 7, 8 years old. I mean, it's amazing that when I see athletes like that, and I always tell people, I can remember when I interviewed Amanda Scarborough when she was a senior in high school, when she played against Brian. I also interviewed Megan Gibson when she was a senior and played against Brian in high school. But when you see those people go on and eventually Rod Bernstein types and those Gerald Carter, I covered those people to a certain extent, and they went on and had great pro careers. It kind of does your heart good.
Yeah, it's cool to see guys like Caruso and Jackson do what they did, because you know how hard they worked to get there. Kind of cut from the same cloth, right? You know, they were guys that weren't the heralded recruit. They had to work their way through the G League to get into the pros itself, and here they are playing in the NBA Finals. And Caruso for sure is having a huge impact on the Thunder's season. He was great covering Anthony Edwards there against Minnesota in that series.
All those people I mentioned, I was never out of their mouth when they talked, and no off the field problems. It's amazing when you stop and consider, you know, they were brought up right, and they represented their high schools and college great. And you'd like to see more of that. And maybe we will. Maybe that'll be one of the good things come out of NIL, that people now, they're getting paid. And so anytime they screw up, they're going to cost themselves money, more so than ever before, because they can get paid in college. So we'll see.
Maybe Nick Scorton will be the next one, help lead the Carolina Panthers
there you go.
To a Super Bowl
and
title.
Like Ross Rogers said, the first time he's coached a kid that goes, and he had a lot of great athletes, and so somebody's always got to be the first. And and hopefully Nick does. Now, he didn't have the kind of junior year we thought he would here at A&M, but that happens. So hopefully we'll be writing great things about him in the NFL.
Well, hey, that's all we got this week on the My Nation podcast.
That's
enough. You probably got work to do.
I do. Why is that?
I don't know. But hey, check theeagle.com for all the things that he's writing today. And me, I guess, if I do something. We'll see you next week on the My Nation podcast.